everyone, my name is Emma, and today I want to talk about Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. Sarah J. Maas. Sarah J. Maas. Sarah J. Maas. Heir of Fire is the third book in the Throne of Glass series. We've got Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, Heir of Fire, Queen of Shadows, and, as of September 6th, Empire of Storms. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, Throne of Glass, we follow Celaena Sardothian, who is an assassin. Since this is the third book, there's not much I can say without spoiling, but if you read the first two and you were like, yes, these are good, but I don't see why everybody's freaking out, you have to read this one. You have to read this one. Read this one, because this one is the bestest. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to get right into what goes down in this book. So if you have not read this book, leave now, read the book, come back. Well, if you have not read Throne of Glass or Crown of Midnight, read those first. Then read this one. Then come back and we will discuss what happens in this book. Okay, Heir of Fire. So we open on Celaena. She's in Wendelin. She's not doing so good. She's laying on the roof, drinking wine, brawling at night, gambling away her amethyst ring from Kale, and then getting it back. One of my favorite things about this book is that we see Celaena in a whole new way. She's always been in control, she's always been able to navigate everything, but in this one, she's struggling. At the end of Crown of Midnight, she lost Nehemia, and now she's in this new land all by herself, and she's supposed to be assassinating the Ashrivers, who are her cousins. So she gets there and she pretty much right away decides she will not be assassinating her cousins. So right now, Celaena is a mess, but that doesn't last for long because we meet Rowan. Yes. In the usual manner of Sarah J. Maas's men, Rowan is not that nice at first. Rowan is a stone-cold warrior fae. Until now, we haven't seen the fae face-to-face. In the last one, we learned that Celaena was fae, or part fae. So in this book, we get to see a lot of the fae and the demi-fae. One that we meet is Rowan. So Rowan takes her to see Maeve, her evil aunt. If you have not read ACOTAR, just mute the screen for a little bit because I need to compare something from A Court of Thorns and Roses and Heir of Fire. I'll put my hand down when you can play if you've not read A Court of Thorns and Roses. Did anybody else notice that Maeve has the same powers as Rhysand? They said that there were legends about Maeve's other form and that it was shadows and talons and claws. And there was this part when Celaena's talking to her for the first time where she says there was a tapping, then a razor-sharp slicing against her mind. Who does that sound like? It sounds like Rhysand. Holy crap. Okay, I'm done talking about that. So Maeve tasks Rowan with training Celaena because Celaena wants information from Maeve, but Maeve says, no, I'm not gonna help you for free, but if you train with Rowan and you master your firepower, I'll tell you what you want to know. I'm wondering, what is Maeve's ultimate plan in all this? Is she trying to get the wired keys? Why did she want Celaena to master her magic? I don't know. Rowan and Celaena do not get off to the best start. Within a day of meeting each other, he punches her in the face, although granted, she deserved it. Celaena is really pulled two ways in this book. There's the one side of her that feels guilty, not taking up her claim to the throne and being a queen, and then there's the promise that she made to Nehemia that she would free her people. But there's also this side of Celaena that is selfish and she just kind of wants to be normal. She's really pulled two different ways in this book. Rowan starts training Celaena, and it's basically the worst teacher ever. But it's okay because Celaena is basically the worst student ever. For a good portion of this book, he's just sitting there saying, shift. And she's like, no. And he's like, shift. She's like, no. And then they beat each other up and they curse a lot. Or Rowan beats her up and then she throws a tantrum. He takes her to the Whites, but she doesn't encounter a White. Instead, she encounters what we come to realize is a Valg, which is basically like a demon. And he drags her through her worst memories. Rowan's like, oops. Finally, after a while of this, of them screaming at each other, beating each other up, and not shifting, she's like mouthing off to him, and he just grabs her tongue, like in the middle of her talking. Rowan's just like, no. No. The scene where she finally shifts, he bites her because when Fae get upset, apparently they bite each other. She gets so mad that she shifts into her Fae form. Not for the first time, actually. When she encountered the Valg, she did shift, but it was like she was shifting back and forth between human and fae so quickly that it hurt her. So she finally shifts, but she has no control of her magic. The skinwalkers, they grossed me out. But that scene was cool because Selena shifts and then we finally get to see them working together in that skinwalker scene. So good. Meanwhile, back in Adderland, Kale now knows who Selena is. Him and Dorian are kind of distant from each other ever since Dorian's magic came out, because Kale doesn't know how to deal with that either. He's also forever loyal to Dorian. He wants to find a way to help Dorian with his magic. Honestly, in this book, especially in the beginning, I think Kale is kind of scared of Selena. In the last book, he saw her do some terrible things, and he really has a hard time dealing with that side of her, but also he's scared of who she could be if she is Aelin. Then we meet Aedion. Aedion is Selena's cousin, and at first we don't trust him. We think he's working for the king, but pretty quickly we find out that he is forever loyal to Aelin, and he's been working all these years to protect the people of Terrasen best that he can. He's also built a name for himself as a ruthless general in the king's army. He would have taken the blood oath, apparently. In Terrasen, just one person takes the blood oath. Maeve has, 5, 6 warriors who all have taken the blood oath to her. Maybe that's because she's immortal. I really enjoyed Aedion and Dorian's banter in this book. That scene where they go for a walk. As soon as they're out of sight of the guards, Aedion just pushes Dorian into a rose bush. Oh my gosh, he is Selena's cousin. Rereading Dorian's parts with Sorsha in this book was so painful because I've read the book before and now I know what's gonna happen. And the first time I read it, I thought Dorian and Sorsha were adorable. I thought they were super cute. But this time I know how it ends. Rereading all those really sweet moments, I forgot how much I liked them together. I thought it was so interesting that Sorsha was there for all of their adventures in the first 2 books. All those times that they got injured, she was the one tending to them. Dorian's magic explodes, and Sorsha sees, and she decides to start helping him. And thus begins one of the cutest relationships that made me cry so much. I've already read this book, so I know what happens in the end. So I'm reading their relationship develop all cute and sweet and thinking, she's gonna die. And the whole time I'm just thinking about Sorsha being beheaded. No. Kale and Aedion start working together. Aedion is also part fae, but he's kind of different than Aelin. Aedion doesn't have any magical powers, but he's super strong and super fast. He has super smell that the fae have. That's why he's so successful as a general. Kale tells Aedion about the wired keys and the king's whole plan, and Dorian overhears. And Dorian's like, Kale, what you doing, bro? I love how solid Dorian is in this book. He's like reeling from all the news about who Selena is and like getting magical powers. Pretty easily, he makes up his mind that Selena's his friend. And he even says, once she comes back, we can set out changing the world together. A new point of view that we have in this book is Manon and the witches. When you start reading, you're probably not going to care about Manon, like, at all. When I read it for the first time, it took me like half the book to actually want to read Manon's part. So we've got Iron Teeth and Crocians, but under Iron Teeth, there's the Blackbeak clan, the Yellowlegs, and the Blue Bloods. Manon is an Iron Teeth witch. Manon's first chapter pretty much establishes her as this heartless killer who like drinks the blood of men, and the rest of the book is proving that she does have a heart. So the king wants these witches to learn to ride dragons. Wyverns, but they're dragons. He wants them to learn to ride these wyverns and be like his aerial cavalry. I love how, compared to all the witches, the king's men are kind of pathetic. They don't take them seriously at all. I guess it's because they're immortal. Speaking of immortality, does anybody else wonder if when magic is freed, Aelin will be immortal or maybe even just have a super long life? In Adderland, with magic frozen, the witches have started to age normally. We don't know all her fae powers. We've seen a lot of it, but for all we know, she could be immortal. Aelin, or Selena, and Rowan are getting along better now. They start investigating these creepy murders. She still has hardly any control over her magic. I love the scene where they play together. They have to run like 20 miles. So they start running, and it's like the first time that Selena's run in her fae form. And Rowan's like playing tag and like snapping at her and stuff. And she's like, oh my gosh, Rowan's playing with me. Gavriel shows up, who is one of Rowan's cadre, and Rowan says some really terrible things to Selena, and Selena says some really terrible things to Emrys and Malachi and Luca. I love how Emrys stands up to Rowan, even though everyone is scared of Rowan. Emrys is like, what are you doing to this girl? Why do you keep pushing her down? And Rowan's like, I guess I have been doing that. I love Emrys scolding Selena and Rowan for brawling with each other, beating each other up, and cussing all the time. That scene where Selena runs outside and it says, "Fireheart, why do you cry?" And she's like, "Because I am lost and I don't know the way." Oh. There's the sea monster scene that further demonstrates what a terrible teacher Rowan is. He takes Luca and puts him out on this lake, freezes it, and then he's like, "Oh, I didn't know there was a giant sea monster under there. Sorry, guys." Selena finally lands some blows on Rowan. There was this line, "Oh, hitting him in the face felt so good." Finally, Selena tells Rowan what happened to Nehemia, and I love that scene. Rowan asks what happened to the two men, and Selena tells him, and he's just like, "Good, I'm glad." Selena brings Rowan the salve for his burns. We get the story about Rowan's mate, how he lost his mate. Rowan says, "I haven't really come back from the loss of my mate, but maybe we can figure it out. Together. Rowan is just better together." I love how Rowan asks all these questions that no one has asked Selena, or at least she's never told the answers to. He asks about Arabin, he asks about her family, he asks about Adian and her birthright and why she doesn't want to be queen. I love that Rowan's the first person who she really talks to, and she also tells Rowan about Sam. They don't show her telling him about Sam, but she says that she told him the story of how she lost Sam, and I don't think she's ever told anybody that story before. Selena finally starts to get some control over her magic. We have that burnout scene where she doesn't run out of her magic, she kind of loses control and like gives in to the power of her magic. Rowan finally finds out about Endovir. I love all of the scenes. From this point on, all the Aelin Rowan scenes are my favorite. If you can't tell, this is my favorite of the Throne of Glass books. I love Queen of Shadows, but Heir of Fire is just my fave. Aelin and Rowan start being all territorial over each other. Aelin says Rowan goes berserk, and she mentions that she is like glaring at all the females who are looking at him. Rowan gets all fussy and adorable and is taking care of her, and he won't let her stop eating or drinking tea. Selena starts training on her own. Rowan's talking to the sentries, and the guy's like, "I've never seen anybody move like that." She's throwing fire at the wards, and then it's bouncing back and she's blocking it. That scene where she tells Rowan, they're like up a tree somewhere, she tells Rowan that she almost killed Kale one time. He's like, yeah, he's not your mate. Back in Aderlin, Dorian and Sorsha are being the cutest, and they have their first kiss, and it's so adorable. We find out how the king froze magic, and tentatively how to break the spell. Because Cadian does that thing. Cadian, oh my gosh. I just made up a ship name for Adian and Kale by accident. Kale does that thing with Dorian where he makes a triangle, and then Dorian like knocks one over in his anger, and Kale's like, "Oh, that's a good idea." So we think Manon is going to get Titus, one of the biggest, strongest, fiercest of the Wyverns. But instead, the bait beast, the beast that they've kept there to get the other beasts to attack, he challenges Titus for Manon. So Manon starts to grow a heart because now she has a pet dragon. Abraxos, as she calls her wyvern, is damaged from being a bait beast, so she has to give him iron teeth and iron spikes in his tail just to go to those creepy spiders and get spider silk to sew into his wings so that his wings are strong enough. Abraxos seems to be smarter than the other wyverns. I don't know if the other wyverns are smart too, they just haven't figured it out, but Manon notices that Abraxos listens to her conversations. He understands when she gives him commands. Ooh, that fight between Manon and Iskra. Iskra whips Abraxos. I was so mad, and Manon just flips and she attacks Iskra, like beats her up before her friends are like, "Whoa, Manon, Abraxos is fine. Look at what you're doing." Manon's like, "Oh, didn't mean to, whoops." Manon and the witches, they compete in these war games, and Manon shows that Abraxos has made her heart grow size because she saves Petra, the blue blood heir. I love how the 13 are really loyal to Manon. Yes, technically they're loyal to the matron. If it comes down to it, they would pick Manon, and Manon doesn't realize that yet. It turns out that these murders that Selena and Rowan have been investigating are by these Valg princes that King has sent to kill the Demi-Fae, because in a war, the Demi-Fae would be a huge help to Wendelin. Okay, the slave massacre scene. I know I've said so many times that scenes are my favorite, but this one I think is like the all-time favorite, or maybe second, tied with another scene. Because we get to see everybody's reaction. We see Rowan and Emerys and all them, and then we see them tell Selena. Then we see Kale and Adian and Dorian and Sorsha. They tie it all together with the musicians playing. It makes me cry every time. I feel like maybe this time I even cried more than I did the first time. Why? Huge battle at the end. Selena fights the Valg. We learn more in those memory flashbacks about Selena than I feel like we have, like, ever. Baby Dorian at the castle with baby Aelin, and he's talking about baby Kale. He's like, I already have a friend, and he's gonna be the fiercest warrior ever. Oh, he's talking about Kale. Oh my gosh. When I read this the first time, I had not read the Assassin's Blade novellas, where we learn all about Sam. There's that scene in her Valg hallucination things. It's the first day at Endovir, but Nehemia's the one whipping her, and then it changes to Sam being the one whipping her. Oh. So she goes through all her painful memories, and then she rises, and she comes back, and she's Aelin, and Rowan runs to her, and they're Karanam, and they share their magic, and they burn up all the Valga princes, and it's so good. And then she finally tells Rowan her whole story, start to finish, like she's never told anybody before. And then he picks her up and throws her in the lake and jumps in laughing after her. Aelin and Rowan go to Doranel to talk to Maeve. All I can say is do not mess with Aelin of the Wildfire. She shows Maeve that vision. Yeah, and I got this ring, and you're gonna free Prince Rowan. And Maeve's like, a blood oath is eternal. And Aelin's like, yeah, I don't care. Free him. She's a queen now. She's risen out of her foggy morning state, and she's even got some super cool tattoos on her back. I know in the end, Rowan can't go with Aelin to Adderland, but it took so long for this friendship to become what it did that I just want him to be able to go with her. Like, she needs him. She needs him with her. Again, I hadn't read the novellas yet when I read this for the first time. So the last line of the book, she was Aelin Ashriver Galathenius, and she would not be afraid, didn't hit me as hard as it did this time, because now I know certain things about why she says that. Then we have the end scene with Hale, Dorian, Sorsha, and Adian. This is like the scene where everyone is awesome and everything bad happens. Adian is so awesome, giving himself up and telling the king that he's the rebel, and he's like, when my queen comes back, she's gonna rip you to shreds. Dorian is such a king cinnamon roll. Dorian gets on his knees and begs the king to spare Sorsha, and he just says no. And then before he can blink, Sorsha's beheaded, Dorian's screaming, and I'm crying. Kale stands up and draws his sword, and he's like, I will not serve you anymore. There is one king in this room, and he is not on that throne. I love how Dorian, the king, threatens Kale. He's like, that's the last straw. So Kale gets away, and the king puts the Valg demon prince collar on Dorian. Baby Dorian. Those are all my thoughts on Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. I can't really give my predictions because I've already read Queen of Shadows, so I know what happens in the next book. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. My name is Emma. Thanks for watching.